Yes, Xi Jinping has been saying for some years now that the East is rising, the West is declining, that this is China's great moment, China's great opportunity to assert itself, and in his words, move China closer to being at the center of world affairs. And what the US has just done, presiding over the disastrous collapse of the Afghan government and army, and of course the fall of Afghanistan to Taliban rule, is a shock to US allies and friends everywhere around the world. It's a blow to US credibility, and it only vindicates Xi Jinping's thesis. And Xi Jinping said just in February that the greatest source of chaos in the world at the moment is the US. So he's feeling, I'm sure, pretty happy about being vindicated on that this week, these last 2 weeks.
But Peter, does it not necessarily then give what the US has said, their attention needs to focus squarely on China's rise and China's assertions in the region and in our region? They can't do everything at once.
Well, that's exactly the Joe Biden rationale. Biden said when he was announcing the forthcoming US withdrawal from Afghanistan, that was exactly the rationale. He said, we need to concentrate our resources on the challenges of the future, and he specifically named China, and he has said repeatedly that the US is in a competition with China for the 21st century. He certainly sees that as absolutely the main game. And so that is the rationale, but at the same time, you can't preside over a showpiece of world-class incompetence in one theatre and expect that that will somehow give you better standing in the other. And the Chinese government, as have other US rivals around the world, seized on it as an opportunity to torment and mock the US, and in particular, Chinese Communist Party-owned media have used the opportunity to rattle Taiwan and to say, see what's happened in Kabul, that's your future if you think the Americans can save you.
And it's not just rhetoric, Peter. You know, China, while the world's attention is rightly focused on Afghanistan, they've been making moves that would be very disturbing to Taiwan.
Yes, well, last week, while, as you say, all attention is focused in Afghanistan, but last week the Chinese were holding military maneuvers near the Taiwan Strait in a deliberate part of their ever-escalating intimidation and pressure campaign against Taiwan. And the day after those maneuvers finished, there was the announcement that the Chinese government would be building reclaiming some land in the Taiwan Strait and building an airport purportedly for tourists, just in case large numbers of tourists wanted to descend on a reclaimed island in the Taiwan Strait. And it just happens that this would be just off the Chinese coast at the closest possible point to Taiwan itself, just a little over, maybe about 120 kilometers from Taiwan's coastline. And they're going to spend about $500 million building this airport on reclaimed land. And other proposals have been bruited in China in recent years, have included building an underwater tunnel across to Taiwan and building a bridge across to Taiwan. All of this is intended to increasingly entwine and enmesh Taiwan in the mainland Chinese system and make it more and more irretrievable for Taiwanese any attempt at independence, and of course make it harder for the US to make any attempt to defend Taiwan against Chinese ambition.
And it must be becoming increasingly disturbing and uncomfortable for Taiwan. Could China go even further in asserting itself in the South China Sea?
Well, it certainly could. The sort of international community of hand-wringers and commentators look at two distinct possibilities as the next likely steps or next anticipated steps from Xi Jinping. One is some sort of move to tighten its defences or its assertions over control of Taiwan, and the other is a suspicion that China might want to, as it's attempted to do in another area recently, declare an air defence identification zone over the South China Sea. which would mean that any foreign aircraft flying, international commercial or military aircraft flying in the area would be required to give Beijing advance notice and seek permission to enter the area. If either of those were to happen, that would provoke a sharp rhetorical response from the US and China's neighbours, none of whom agree to its territorial claims in the region. Whether it would invoke anything harder is impossible to know. But it's also the case that we don't know. I mean, Xi Jinping has demonstrated an ability to spring complete surprises on the world. For example, its unannounced and unexpected swoop on Hong Kong.
So then when we look at Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the US, in the region at the moment, restating the case that the US stands with its allies and it won't be threatened by China, just how reliable is it as an ally these days?
Well, this is the great trick that the US is trying to pull off at the moment, is to say, no, look, our allies in Asia, please don't look at Afghanistan. That's not the future, that's the past. Please listen to what Kamala Harris, is saying to you today in Singapore and shortly in Vietnam as well, where she's also travelling. China I should say, the Indo-Pacific, she says, is, quote, the main game, unquote. The Chinese are guilty of coercive and intimidatory tactics, she said today in Singapore, and the US will be here as your steadfast ally and guarantor of security. So she's asking Asian leaders to be comforted by that message rather than shaken by the debacle unfolding in Afghanistan.
Good to talk, Peter, as always. Thanks so much.
Pleasure, Beth.